Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Welcome back, everyone. We have a great episode today. I know you're going to find this one particularly fascinating. My guest today is Victoria Thomas. Victoria Thomas is the CFO and co-owner of Kellymoss, which happens to be the most decorated Porsche racing team in North America. The company combines championship motorsport, custom vehicle builds, and luxury racing experiences. It was founded in 1988, and now it boasts 135 employees, 48 national championships, and more than 100 Porsche products in an 88,000 square foot facility. Victoria, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, great to be here. And I was excited by the opportunity to do this. And in fact, before we get on the air, I sort of gave the analogy that being in Boston, everybody thinks that they know more about the Boston Red Sox than the manager of the Boston Red Sox. And I suspect in your case, there's probably a similar dynamic in play. But why don't you fill in the blanks for what I might have left out about Kellymoss?
I think you did a great job. We're definitely a Porsche-centric brand, and we wrap pretty much everything that we do around that brand because they are exceptional with supply and demand, and they have an exceptional product. But the team we are known for Porsche racing, and we are also do high-end Porsche builds, and as well as that, we have a lifestyle brand that takes our clients are affluent, and there are some people that love the brand and can't have access, and our membership gives you access in your home to the brand in a very special way. So innovation on and off the track is something that's very primary to who we are.
So I like to ask, and again, it's a well-known company, but what's something about the company that, maybe people would be surprised to learn?
I would say the name, if you're within the Porsche circles, the name is very big. People in Europe know who we are. It would be surprising that when I came on board 14 years ago, there were 9 employees and we ran about 4 cars. So I think that people would be surprised how rapid the growth has been because we've been so strongly affiliated with the Porsche brand for so long.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's interesting. My fun fact, and I mentioned you right before we went on the air, but the former CFO of the CFO Leadership Council, Kristen Larson, she races Porsches. And she told me she was at a race in Tilton, New Hampshire, I think. And someone in the crowd had a heart attack. So they said, is there a doctor? And there were like 17 amongst the racers that were there. So we were joking that, the best place in the world to have a heart attack is a hospital. The second best place is at a Porsche race, apparently. Doctors drive Porsches. So,
yeah, I think that doctors are probably pretty well represented.
Indeed. So cool. Well, I want to return to the company in a moment, but first, I'd like to discuss a little about your own background. So, where did you grow up?
So, I grew up in a very, very small town outside of Madison, Wisconsin, farming community. Very small school, the class sizes were about 100 people. So definitely didn't have exposure to racing, didn't have exposure to, cars were not anything that were part of my lifestyle back then. It was just sort of a simple farming life.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And you had, to say the least, a little bit of a non-traditional educational background for a successful CFO. And I'd love to, touch upon that a little bit, starting, I know you were an emancipated minor and got when you were still a teenager. I'd love to explore that a little bit.
I think that what you'll see as a common theme is that everything about my life is just a smidge non-traditional. So I grew up in a home where I was always taught that there is no limit to what I'm capable of and who I can be. And my family was quite entrepreneurial, and so I was always sort of an outside the box thinker. And I lived in this tiny town on a farm where we were 15 miles from the little town that we lived in. And, the last day of school, I would go to the farm and I wouldn't see any of my friends until the first day of school, the beginning of the next year. My parents were farmers. They didn't have time to drive me around to visit my friends. So I decided that I needed to get a job so that I could get a car so that I could go see my friends, but I couldn't get a job because I had no way to get to my job. So I ended up doing a bunch of research, and I learned that if you were an emancipated minor, I could sign a lease and I could live somewhere in Madison, so in a bigger municipality where I could take a bus until I had enough money saved up to be able to buy a car. So I pitched it to my mom. I said, here's the deal. I'm responsible. I would really like to become an emancipated minor and move into town so that I can get a job, so that I can get a car and not be stuck here at the farm. I don't know how I spun that in such a way that she believed that I was responsible enough on my 17th birthday to move out, but that's exactly what I did. And I came to Madison and started to attend school and, ride the bus back and forth. And what ended up happening is they said, you know what, you're going to have to go to summer school in order to graduate, because you don't have enough credits in science or whatever it was. The school districts had different requirements for graduation. And I was like, no way am I going to go an extra. I'm not going to go an extra semester. So I once again went back I did a bunch of research, and I found out that in the United States at that time, which was 1987, if you took your GED and scored in the top 3 percentile of the country, the school was mandated to give you a diploma. I'm like, ooh, I'm onto something. I had faith in my ability to learn. And so I took my GED and I scored in the top 3 percentile. So I dropped out of high school, actually, scored in my top 3 percentile. And the school that I was attending was forced to give me a diploma. So, right, problem solved, right? And then I realized any employer is going to ask for my transcript. And then they're going to know that I didn't graduate a traditional way. How shameful, right? So I had to immediately go to college so that I could have people look at my college transcript and not my high school transcript. And then it was, kind of the same scenario. I was halfway through going to college. I, of course, was living on my own, and I had car payments and all of this stuff. So I had huge debt in college. I couldn't afford to keep going to college because it was so expensive. I was obviously doing it on my own. And I ended up, once again, I went to the library and did a bunch of research and figured out a way to get a grant to pay for my last 2 years of college. My 4 years of college, I had straight A's with the exception of 1 B plus my first semester, my freshman year. But again, sort of step after step of just going about life in this very non-traditional way. I can't imagine that there's a lot of emancipated minors that are super close with their family. And it was just it was an opportunity for me to take control of my life in a different way. Not that I think that it was smart, but I definitely learned my lessons from it and applied it.
No, that's fantastic. And for our younger listeners, and we have a lot of younger ones, do you want to explain to them what a library is? But, to them, they're thinking, all the world's access you can get without leaving your bedroom, right? If you're so.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It used to be so much more difficult. You had to get yourself there and spend so much time groping through books and trying to figure out how to get the answers that you were seeking. Definitely rooting out information in that environment was a skill set of its own.
I can imagine. Well, kudos to you and bluntly, to your mother for allowing to do that, right? I mean, I look back when I was that age, I just can't imagine my suggesting that to my mother and father would have really gone particularly well. That wouldn't have been a very pleasant conversation, I don't think. So.
Yeah. It was very interesting. She was she was surprised that I was actually going through with it. I think she thought that she would say yes, and I would start to investigate how much an apartment was every month and food and all of that. But I sink my teeth in pretty deep when I make a decision. So
Well, good, even as a teenager, good for you. I'm
yeah,
sure that's
yeah,
continuing to-
yeah.
So I'd love to chat a little about your career path. I know a couple of the stops you had along the way, but what were some of the early jobs, and how did they prepare you for what you're doing now?
One of my very first jobs was, again, coming from an entrepreneurial family and realizing that I was able to fund half of my college education at a private college, which was quite expensive at the time, by doing research about grants and scholarships. I thought, I'm going to start my own business. It was called Scholar Connections, and I rented an office and I worked at night. And the point of it was to help other people find scholarships and grants and ways to pay for their education. I think that a lot of people, using sort of traditional language, would call that a non-successful business, because I was in business maybe 2.5 years, if memory serves. And that business, is not around today. So is that a failure? Oh my gosh, the lessons that I learned in that. The first of which is I was literally appealing to a client base that had no money to pay me whatsoever. I didn't take that into consideration. I think that I probably charged like $40, and I would spend hours in the library researching, trying to find you scholarships and grants. It was the lessons about making your mistakes on paper and doing business plans and understanding your target audience and running financial statements so that you can have an understanding of what that will look like projected into the future. All of those incredible lessons to apply to life, all through my failures. But I never, ever was ashamed of that not succeeding, because I very early on learned to frame failure as where your lessons come from. And I'm still just such a firm believer in that now.
Yeah, people learn a lot more from failure than they do from success.
Yeah.
I'd almost challenge the premise that it wasn't successful because it set you up in everything you learned, but
Yeah.
okay, you didn't make enough money and you didn't take the company public, but you were impacting individuals and families' lives by what
Yeah.
you're doing. And, so even if you didn't make a nickel off of it,
Yeah.
and you're right, if you'd gone to Harvard and got an MBA from their B school, they probably would have advised you not to do that, right?
Yes,
Don't seek out customers that can't pay. So,
yeah, exactly. But I think that the path to learning, when you have that much emotion tied with it, it's so impactful, right? Like some of the hardest lessons are just the absolute best resources you can find.
yeah, I can imagine. So, no, that's great. You've had an interesting start. So when you look back on your career, are there people that like stick out, whether they were mentors, formal or informal, or just individuals that you crossed and you look back and say, wow, I learned a lot from that person?
I had, again, because my trajectory was so non-traditional, I would struggle to think of a single job that I ever had outside of, when I was waitressing in high school, that anybody actually sat down with me and said, this is the way you're supposed to do the job. I almost always have gotten, this is your job, figure it out. And so what really it comes down to is the people that actually believed in me. When I was outside of high school, I took a job at a company that is quite large now in our area that was called Dave Jones, and it was a plumbing and heating contractor. I took a job as the office manager, and the position of finance manager opened up, and he said, I'd really like for you to apply. And I looked through, there were like 47 tasks listed on the job description. I said, I've never done a single one of these. And he said, I promise you can do all of it. And I did. And that was really, the start of me moving up into these higher level finance roles, and being able to use the information of the financial statements as a tool for being an engine for the future. And that really just came from that one human being besides my mom, right? The one human being that absolutely believed in me. And I think it's so powerful to be aware of what even a sentence can do to change somebody's life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, who would have thought, that you'd be the CFO of Kellymoss coming from that. But you also, along the way, you owned an accounting firm.
Yes, yes.
And so if you could tell us a little about that. I mean, how does one own an accounting firm unless you started it or something like that? But
I did start it. When the technology started to change such that paperless was a thing that was an opportunity. I had a company that was called Accountability. And what we did is, step one is always operating from a known position. The beauty of it was I had 5 amazing women, almost all of them had their master's degree, that were incredibly intelligent, brilliant, finance-minded women that chose to pause their careers and put having a family first. So what I did differently with Accountability is I said, commit to me the number of hours that you can work a week. I don't care when it happens. You have to promise me you'll raise a flag if you can't do it. But just get those hours done or raise a flag, and you can do it when the kids go to bed. You can do it, get up early whenever you do it. And so we were able to get small businesses to a known financial position, and then be able to be, fractional CFO roles to increase cash flow, increase profitability, and decrease taxation for these small businesses. So businesses that absolutely couldn't afford that type of mindset involved in their business month to month, we provided that resource for them. And so it was just, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to take this group of bright people that really their only option was to work retail if they wanted to put their kids first, so that their child's schedule was the most important thing. Retail was the option for them back. People won't remember, a lot of people won't know what it was like back in the day before technology allowed you to operate, remotely and all of that. It was very, very new. This was 25 years ago.
Interesting. I was going to, so when did you work at Accountability or launch Accountability?
So when I did that when I got pregnant with my first child. So I launched that about 26 years ago.
Okay.
And it grew very, very fast. At the time, you had tax accountants that regurgitated the facts in the way that it was appropriate to be able to file tax returns, check that obligation box. And other than that, you really didn't have people that were parsing information as a tool. So to be able to, I never advertised anything, just the ability for small businesses to recommend, oh my gosh, we can make these decisions, based on our real situation, our actual financials to grow our business and be more successful, was very rare back then.
Indeed. I asked about the timing because I actually worked for a company called Accountability Outsourcing.
Really?
Yeah, it was a similar business model. I was there. I was brought in. A friend of mine owns the company, and I worked for about a year and a half doing business development for them. Still, actually, they've rebranded. The name of the company now is Charles River CFO, but it's a very similar business model, even to the point of a lot of my colleagues were women who were, young mothers that, some of them work 9 to 5, absolutely. But a lot of them, it was weird to, get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd be getting emails from people that they sent to me. But they were good people. They were just, on a, what at the time was kind of considered maybe a weird career path, but it's a lot more common these days for sure.
Yeah, much more common these days.
So anyway, you were working in Accountability, and one of your clients was Kellymoss.
Well, I wasn't taking on any clients.
Okay.
And I received a telephone call asking if I could come in and help out with, they were looking for somebody to come in as a consultant and determine the profitability of the different divisions of the company. Like many small businesses, everything sort of flowed to the checking account, and that's how they determined if they were successful or not, right? If there was money in the checking account, that meant that they were winning, and if there wasn't, they weren't. So they didn't know if they were, making $100,000 a year in racing and then losing $50,000 a year in the body shop, for example. So I came in, I had a friend who still remains a great friend. His name is Steve, and he raced cars out of high school. I went to high school with him. He raced cars out of high school, and I called him, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, you have to go to that gig. Like, you have to go meet with them because these people are like it for Porsche racing." And so I came in to do the consulting. One of the first conversations that I had with the owners is I said, "Are you aware of the fact that your highest producing technician is your lowest paid employee?" And they're like, "How could you possibly know that?" So they ended up making me 7 job offers. On the 7th job offer, I sold my book of business and came on board.
Wow, 7 job offers. They really
Yeah.
wanted you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'd said the one thing that you can't absolutely assure me is someday I won't come in on a Monday and the business will be, you'll decide to move to Florida or something. So I was quite apprehensive. I loved being in control. But also as, anybody that's ever owned their own business, it's a lot of hours and a lot of work. And I was very prone to waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and your brain starts going. And next thing you know, I'm in my office working away. And I thought that I was going to be removing myself from that lifestyle. But roll forward a few years and I'm owner and right back at it.
there you go. Yeah, I think you're going to be an owner probably most of the rest of your career, no matter what you do. But no, because it's interesting because it sounds like to me, and I'm sort of learning as we talk here, but it sounds like it was a very small company with extremely good brand in its own industry, probably loyal customers and 100% name recognition with the people who matter. And they were good at that, but they weren't good at business and finance.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Yes. So you came in and sort of figured some things out and made better decisions.
I really applied standard procedures and common practice. But a lot of times people, especially in this industry, they're so passionate about what they do. Like racing is wonderful. Bookwork, not so much. So they would, they'd drop an engine in a car and they're more concerned about getting that driver on the track and they just never bill it. And they're like, "Did we used to have embezzlement before you? No, I'm actually billing things." Like, so yeah. And I brought in practices like having meeting agendas, all of these brilliant outside the box thinking that, they just, it was standard practice. They just hadn't experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wasn't there or anything, but it sounds like the type of place people join so they can do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the assignment that I'm working on. I want to put this engine in this car. So
yeah.
But that's great that you were able to make that type of an impact from a business background.
Yeah.
Still, it sounds like keep kind of the fun entrepreneurial spirit of the company. And then but I do want to ask because I tend to think, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but you're working in a male-dominated industry, at least traditionally, and certainly when you joined. Did that present any issues, any particular challenges? Because you went in as a leader right away, right? I mean, it's not like you worked your way from the bottom up.
Yeah, I would say largely the company that I was talking about, where the gentleman said, I believe that you have the skill set to oversee our finance. That was construction. I was the only female. I was pretty accustomed to that environment. I absolutely, to my core, believe that you can use challenges to be your fuel, or you can use challenges to make you a victim. I can assure you with absolute confidence that I was never underpaid in any role that I worked at, but that was because back then women were paid quite differently. It's still not great. We're making progress. We're not all the way there. I felt like it was my job to keep a list, and I would list all of the ways that I made the company money or saved the company money or brought value to the company. So when it came time for my review, I didn't sit there and hope that I was going to get more money. I said, this is how much money I want, and this is why I deserve it. here are all the things that I did this year, and it will cost you money to lose me. That's taking a scenario where there's potential for you to be a victim of underpayment and taking all that power back. That type of thing has always been something that's fueled me. So I would say I've probably done better by being in scenarios that lean towards something that might feel unfair, because I have figured out how to make me stronger. And everybody has that choice as an adult, to be able to choose how they filter information that comes into them. I choose to filter that as something that is empowering. For me, when I started to become eyes up to the fact that there were absolutely no women in the industry whatsoever, which was a telephone call from a woman named Lynn St. James, who was just an absolute pioneer in the industry. And she called and said, how is the most successful Porsche race team in the world have a female owner? And I didn't know it. And she kind of made me lift my head and start looking around and paying attention to the opportunity there to be a voice, and raise awareness about our sport as a amazing sport to get involved in as a female. But I think, for me, what an amazing opportunity that I have to be able to, especially, think about it in accounting or finance, you're kind of head down doing your thing, right? There's a lot of alone time, and to be able to lift my head up and be far more public about what I'm doing, because I can literally change an industry. Because you can count on one hand the number of female professional team owners in the world in sports car racing. So I just have this great opportunity to use my voice and bring change. There's 51% of the population that we can invite to the table. There's no position in motorsports that requires you to be a man. It's an awareness thing. People never think about it as an opportunity. We did the first ever motorsports patch for the Girl Scouts. So we bring the Girl Scouts in and we turn down the impact guns so they're not as powerful. And we have them change a tire. We have them do these competitive things where they can learn about the different careers. So there's a lot of playing and fun that I get to do that's so outside of, some of the traditional things, but genuinely making a difference in the industry.
Wow, that's like the coolest thing ever. And I just have to ask, did you love fast cars before joining, or because it sounds like your friend did, but maybe you didn't?
Yeah, Steve loved fast cars. I, to this day, am not a fast car person. I have done hot laps with our race car drivers because I have to hold my head high and say that I understand the experience. We do off-road safari builds, and that's sort of like playing in the snow and the sand in these cars. And that's the same degree of adrenaline, but it's at 45 miles an hour and very safe. I love that. The actual racing, not a fan. Just between us, I really don't, I don't enjoy it. I'm thrilled that we're in cars that I feel absolutely safe having clients in, but I don't enjoy that.
Oh, so what's the fastest you've ever driven?
I've passengered at 165.
Oh,
The fastest I've ever driven, for sure, when I was in high school, I went over 100 in my car. It was completely stupid. I'm surprised I didn't kill myself. It was peer pressure. I don't enjoy the fast.
yeah. I've never been anywhere near 160. Does a train count or a plane? Then I have.
Right.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. So,
Yeah.
But I want to chat a little about, just because as a podcaster in the CFO community, I could lose my license if I don't ask you this question about generative AI. And, I'm
Yes.
curious how you're using that and other advanced technologies too within the finance function at your company.
I would say that I am living inside of ChatGPT all day, every day. We were just joking this morning, my husband and I, about he needed to do a task that had to do with creating a log about torque sensors. And just it's like having a personal assistant full time. Obviously there needs to be parameters. It can absolutely get things wrong. It does 80% of the heavy lifting for you. But for me, when it really changed was the recognition that AI has all of this information available and I don't. So I need to stop telling it what to do. And I need to start telling it to ask me questions about what it needs from me to give me the best answer. So that was a complete game changer in terms of me getting a degree higher of accuracy. So with every query that I might do, or investigation or creating charts or all the 1,000 ways I use it all of the time, always it's ask me one question at a time, the top 3 questions that you need to know to provide me the best answer. And that really changed things for me.
That's amazing. So can you use or think of an example where AI improved decision-making or a workflow, whether it be in finance or business operations generally?
I mean, gosh, almost there's so many tasks. Obviously, I'm very, very, very careful about what information goes there. There's never any company information or anything like that, but big batch data for us, being able to just list out a whole bunch of data and have it recognize trending. I mean, that's, some of that stuff is so time consuming and difficult, and it's instantaneous now. Being able to provide a listing of information and say, here's the context, giving context about information, and put on your CFO hat and tell me what my 3 areas of weakness, what are 3 things that I might not notice that I'm missing as I review this report. Different things like that. You can just get this wealth of information back. I am on the United States Chamber of Commerce Small Business Council. And one of the things that we did, and that's a group of 68 small business owners that get together twice a year and go to DC and actually go to Capitol Hill and talk about the things that are on the table at Capitol Hill and how they affect me as a small business owner. R&D tax change was enormous to me as a business owner. And being able to have them understand the impact, that being foisted with such significant fiscal damage to us, being able to be a part of the solution again, as opposed to just waiting to see what happens to bills, there'll be bills and there's things stuck on the backside of them. The people that are voting often aren't even aware of what the impact is, right? So being somebody that says, I'm going to take charge of my life, I'm not going to be a victim of anything, and sitting around feeling like a victim of the tax law changes of R&D, I said, what can I do? And this was something that I could do, right? And so it's when we were getting together with the Small Business Council, one of the very important topics is, of course, AI. And the Chamber of Commerce in Jacksonville, Florida, invited us to come out, and they did a marketing brief on each of the companies that were actually coming to their facility. I think that there were like 18 people. The amount of brilliant information that they were able to share with me about marketing opportunities within my company that I hadn't thought of was shocking. And all they knew about the company was the company name.
Wow, that is really impressive. So it's
and
time to be alive, isn't it? With all the
it's crazy. And one of the more recent ways, just speaking to R&D, one of the more recent ways that we ended up using it is we keep track of the different research and development items that we're working on every year that are potential revenue for the future. Back in the day when you applied for the R&D credit, there was, a handful of questions that they asked you. That's like exploded into, prove your 2 models of testing. And, it's so involved now. Being able to enter a couple of paragraphs about what you're doing, and then, again, listing out the context, the role that they should have, ask me 3 questions, and have them explode out all 21 questions or whatever it is on the R&D form. And then you just have to parse that with your team about how saved so much time. I mean, it used to take it would probably take us about 40 hours and the team about 40 hours. And I would say that it dropped all of that to an 8-hour process. How can it possibly know about where it's research and development on things that don't exist? Brilliant.
It's amazing. It's the biggest. I figured when the internet came out, I was thinking, okay, this is the biggest game changer within my lifetime.
Yeah.
And it seems like internet's going to be number two to generative AI.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it'll all play out. I mean, I know a lot of people that are still just using it to improve the quality of their email communications, but that the potential there is interesting. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And one of the most frequent questions that I get asked from our members is, how do you build a healthy and strategic relationship with the CEO of your company? And
I married him.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting answer right there. We could end it right there. But for those, this will be on YouTube. For those listening, her reaction was priceless. I suggest you jump over to our YouTube channel and watch. But yeah, I mean, you do have Andy Kilcoyne is the CEO and also your husband.
Yes.
So kind of not unique, but the first time I've come across it. Tell us about that dynamic.
Yeah, so there's a lot of fun little stories that are buried in that. Probably the first one is, so Andy came from a racing family. A little bit about his background. His dad was a car chief for Paul Newman. So came from a racing family, ended up working at GM, and he still loved everything about racing. So he was one of the subcontractors for our team that would fly to some of the races and actually physically work on the cars. And when I went to a race event at Road America in Wisconsin, I was in the middle of a meeting and I saw this man that was on our team walk over to the garbage. He had a tool in his hand. He walked over to the garbage and he set the tool down and he took out the garbage and came back and put in a new garbage bag and then went back to what he was doing. And I was like, I want to hire that guy. Didn't know anything about, I would have no way of judging how he handles mechanical, what he was actually physically doing on the car. I knew how he thought. I asked him to come in for a job interview. And basically he said, we got to the point where I was, there was going to be a hire. And I said, here's what the offer is. And he said, respectfully, can you articulate to me why it is that I would literally cut my salary in half to come work here? And I said, are you happy? Do you enjoy your day? Like the 40 hours a week that you're putting in? Does it light you up? And he accepted half of the salary and came and worked here. So he was an engineer. He worked in our race shop. He was promoted into the head of the race shop and then our general manager, and continued to work his way up. Sort of an interesting side story is when people hear that I am a co-owner, the immediate assumption is that it is my partner. And along with that, the immediate assumption is that he brought me into the business to do the books. And what's funny about it is a lot of those boxes check, right? Yeah. But I actually hired him to bring him in. And I tell people that doesn't make you, if you assumed that he brought me in, it doesn't make you sexist. It makes you understand statistical probability, right? I'm not a fan of people trying to backdoor people into thinking, I'm pro women because I'm excited about growing our sport, but I'm not anti men. Just because you think that way does not make you sexist.
It's interesting because you said it. People understand probability, and the first thing I thought of when you mentioned that misconception that people have, I was thinking people are just playing the law of averages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you come up with 50 scenarios like that,
yep, exactly.
The majority of the way people perceive it. So
yep, exactly. So it's just you making a wise decision based on what information has been presented before you. He, with his engineering mind and my background, we very frequently would ideate and come up with the same answer from two different approaches. What we quickly learned is that we complement each other very well in terms of how we work together. And there was a lot of really heavy things that were happening here at the business that we had to solve for. And we were just spending 70 hours a week, just lit up by the opportunity to be able to take the marketing from, hey, we do racing and we're everything to everyone, to narrowing that funnel down to our deepest roots are in Porsche. We're only focused on Porsche, and having that explode the brand awareness as opposed to the opposite, that type of thing. So building the first websites, implementing the first operating software, again, being able to use such a fun thing about the financial statements is you take these things that seem so completely unrelated and you spread that trend line out enough and you can start to make assumptions based on it, all of that type of stuff, right? So we were just lit up by growing this business, just lit up by it. And ultimately, we joke that because we lived and breathed this so much, we didn't have any other opportunity to be able to meet anybody else or date anybody else. So we ended up together. It was the first time I ever in my entire life was willing to date somebody that I worked with. That seemed like a recipe for disaster. I told him under no uncertain terms, I absolutely will not date you. I absolutely will not. I did not know that he's lit up by a challenge that was only more fun for him. But it turned out that my relationships had always been not successful because I'm such an obsessive workaholic, and him the same. And then we can just, we're more tactical in our day to day. And then at night, we're very strategic. And we're at our best when we're going nose to nose problem solving. So it's been very successful.
Yeah, it sounds, his background, engineering, design, and yours, vision, culture, finance, strategy. So between the two of you, you've got sort of everything covered, right? So
yeah, exactly. And he's very quiet. He'll, he contemplates, he has to percolate and think things through for quite a long time. I'm like right off the cuff and I'm loud. And, if you say, who is Kellymoss to Andy, he'll say, we work in automotive. If you say, who is Kellymoss to me, I say, we are the winningest team in Porsche history. There is no company that's had more podium success with this brand in the world than Kellymoss. Like, we're so different, but coming together for one common goal.
Yeah, well, his answer wasn't exactly chock full of information, as they say. Right? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but when you said that your husband was quiet, that made me chuckle. Like, poor guy.
Yeah.
No, cool. But one thing when I was preparing for this that I learned to admire about you is your philanthropic sense. Mm-hmm. And you founded an organization called Race Forward. Mm-hmm. And also you Be Your Own Hero. I'm not sure if you founded it, but you're running it at this point.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'd love to learn a little about those, and our listeners will, and how these organizations sort of reflect your values.
Yeah. So one of the things that became extremely important to me when I recognized that there were only 3% of motorsports was women when I first sort of raised my head and started to do assessment about our industry. And
excuse me, interrupt you. That's 3% of the drivers?
3% of the careers in motorsports.
Yeah,
3% of the careers.
I would believe, but wow.
And that included the women that were doing hospitality. So pretty much every team, the women were in hospitality. So in terms of all of the other areas of motorsports, it didn't dawn on people. It was an awareness problem. It was not men saying we don't want women in motorsports. For sure, in every industry, you have a subset of people that enjoy, that type of banter. But my experience was never that men didn't want women in motorsports. It didn't dawn on men and it didn't dawn on women. So in order to raise awareness, what we did is started to work with sponsors and partners to raise funds so that we could bring on drivers, because it's the most visible position in motorsports, to say, this is an incredible place to have a career, and just raise awareness. So we, in 2023, ran the first ever female in Porsche Carrera Cup North America. In 2024, we ran the first ever African American in Porsche Career Cup 2024. And the beauty of that is it quickly spirals into the conversation, the ability to be able to talk about this, the ability for me to be able to talk about it with you today, Jack, is that people just start to, your reticular activation system is constantly filtering for, does this relate to me? When you've got 11 pieces of information that your subconscious is disregarding towards the 40 pieces of information that it's regarding, we're now making that more relevant to people. So they say, yes, this could be a career path for me. In a very short period of time, our C-suite is half women. We have women technicians, we have women truck drivers, we have women engineers, we have women that manage the tires. Every area of our sport, there's no limitation based on gender in our sport. And now the more people that see it, the more those numbers are just clicking up over and over and over again. Wow. So it's been wonderful to be able to use a platform again to be able to change an industry.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I always like to ask too, and maybe you figured it out, but work-life balance, so critical for executives. And you've got a lot going on. You with this really cool company, fast growing, a lot of stuff, a couple of philanthropic things. I know you're also on the board of Women in Motorsports North America.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours a day. So what do you do for the work-life balance when you're not being your professional self?
So I would, to be perfectly honest, I would say that my average work week is somewhere between 75 and 80 hours. My secret about how I get as much done as I get done is that I am awake by 3:30, 7 days a week. I get almost 4 hours of uninterrupted time where nobody's putting anything on my to-do list. So, 28 hours a week of me knocking things off of my to-do list that most people don't have. But the truth of the matter is I love what I do. And I get to have a nice variety. I'm involved in a lot of the, I'll have some oversight on the marketing stuff, which is a little bit more creative and, casting the vision in terms of what direction the company is going. And then, head down churning on the financials. And I get to wear a lot of different hats in this. And the vast majority of the time. And to be honest, I get to sit down. A lot of our drivers are the heads of enormous companies in this country, so I get to sit and have a meal with people that you would pay $500 to see them as a keynote speaker, because the people that we have on our team are incredible. So I get a lot of diversity and I get a lot of great conversation. The connections that I get to make with people just fill me up.
That's fantastic. We should all aspire to be like you. But I want to, sort of get back to the CFO stuff. And I always love to get my guests' take on how the nature of financial leadership is changing. And I'm particularly interested in your perspective of it because you do have the unconventional background and you just strike me as a person that, you're not going to play by the rules. Find your own path. That's pretty obvious. I don't have to speculate on that. But how do you see, CFOs changing in the years ahead?
I think that the absolute focus on communication, the shift from data reporting and then, kind of trying to use that as your best guess towards the future, to being able to go find a lot of the information from frontline people, as opposed to giving them information, extracting that information from them and having them part of the communication cycle, I think is, to me, it feels like it's quite new. And that could just be my life experiences in the places that I've worked and people that I've worked with. But I feel like there was often more of a sense of the more information that people have, the more likely they are to complain about things. You held fiscal information tight as opposed to shared it, and that you provided them information as opposed to them providing you information. On our org chart, Andy and I are at the absolute bottom. We serve every single person that works on this company. Then the leadership team, they serve all of the people that then directly serve our client base. And it's that same philosophy when it comes to the finance part, right? It's a collaborative communication to get the team the information that they need to be successful. And that's us taking from the difference between the accounting and the finance, right? Being able to work together to provide the information necessary, not to extrapolate the most profit, to extrapolate the best work-life balance for them. I want our employees to not check a box so that they can get to the weekend, but come in and feel lit up by the contributions that they're making, the changes that they're making, the things that they're doing. And we have kind of a sexy product to do that, right? If we build a new car, it's very likely going to be in a lot of publications around the world. So we do have the big advantage of we get to see the team, hang over the wall and cheer on their driver when they take the checkered flag a lot. And we get to see our work published, and that built-in team feeling is part of our culture, of course, by design and what we do, but also making sure that the mundane things that people have to do every single day to get the job done. It's not fun to do a credit card reconciliation, right? It's just, that's not a blast. You have to endure some of that, but have there be enough involvement and pride in what you're doing to be able to say, yes, I feel prideful about how I spent my day.
Wow, that's fantastic. And typically my final question is something you've been giving since we started talking, but I'll ask it anyway. We tend to have a youngish listener base, at least from my perspective, a lot of CFOs and first-time CFOs. And I'd just love to get your advice for the next generation of financial leaders.
I think that my strongest piece of advice would be to pause and appreciate the moments where you feel like you fail. And for me, that's a really, like, when I feel like I fail, I have like a visceral physical pullback. Like if I'm doing this physically, I'm like, ooh, pay attention. There's a big lesson here. When you actually feel like you physically want to withdraw because you're embarrassed or whatever, use that as a flag to say, this is my moment to learn and grow. And be proud of that. Like, there's this thing that you're supposed to come out of the womb and be perfect, right? Recognizing that those moments of failing are your powerful growth moments. Take responsibility for your life. Take responsibility for your success and your failures. And you'll be the best version of you.
Well, that's an amazing answer, Victoria. So thank you. And I also want to thank you just, for your time here today. I know you have an awful lot going on. And with that, I'd just like to give you the final word.
Well, I would say that my final word would be that today's CFO is actually the engine that is driving the future, turning insights into foresight, turning foresights into action. So there's a lot of pride in what we're doing, and we're from the back office. Now we're in the forefront of driving our future.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.